Hello, today I am reviewing Sweetland by Michael Crummey. It was published in 2014 and it takes place in Newfoundland. So what we're presented with in this novel is an older man named Sweetland. Sweetland is his last name, and he also lives in the remote fishing village, well, former fishing village, because the fishing industry has all but collapsed in Sweetland. He lives in the town of Sweetland. His last name is Sweetland. He's lived there for generations. He was born there. His family was born there. It takes place in modern day. They have internet and everything in this fishing village. But the government has offered the people of Sweetland a large sum of money to relocate. It's very similar to the forced relocations of the 1960s, only in this case it's supposedly voluntary. So everyone else in the town of Sweetland has signed on to this deal, except for our main character Sweetland, who doesn't want to move. But the catch is that if Sweetland doesn't sign on, if everyone in the village doesn't sign, then no one gets anything. So everyone in the village is encouraging him and expects him to sign. In terms of characters, we also have Jesse, a young boy who is related to Sweetland. Jesse has some issues, they're not exactly named, but he spends a lot of time talking to Sweetland's dead brother. For Sweetland, the town, the village that he grew up in, that's the only world he knows. The only access to the outside world is by ferry, and of course when all the residents leave, the ferry will stop running. The electricity will be cut off and basically all services will disappear. For Sweetland, leaving his town, his island, would be leaving the only thing that he's ever known. In a sense, to him, Sweetland is an island of history and of ghosts. A lot of this novel revolves around Sweetland's flashbacks. So he remembers things that have happened in the past. One of the key events, it's actually what the novel opens with, Sweetland recalls being a young man and being out on the water and seeing a lifeboat in the fog and a bunch of people in it, and he tows that lifeboat to shore, and it turns out to be Sri Lankan boat people. One of the most important characters in this novel is Queenie Coffin, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but she dies in this novel. I'm going to read this passage to you. On the 1st of July, Hayward Coffin came downstairs to find Queenie dead in her chair by the window. A half-smoked cigarette guttered in her hand. Her book face lay down on her lap. The funeral was delayed to give Queenie's children time to make the trip back from the mainland. Most were traveling from the oil sands in Alberta, her oldest boy coming from Oregon, where he ran a deck and fencing company. All of them forced to wait on the ferry schedule after their flights. The coffin had to be shipped over on the ferry as well from a funeral home in Fortune. And meantime, they waked Queenie on a bare table in the parlor. Clara had washed and laid Queenie out in a purple dress she'd found in her wardrobe, but couldn't dig up a pair of shoes to put on her feet. She hadn't wore shoes since 1977, Haywood told her. Put on her slippers, he said. She might as well be comfortable. The coffin was heavy as a dory and too wide to be carried through the door where Queenie used to stand smoking and talking to passerby. They had to take out the window above her chair to bring it into the house, and again to lift the dead woman out a day later. Half a dozen men reaching their hands to catch her as she crossed into the open air for the first time in 40-odd years. Being careful not to trample the straggle of flowers that had come up from the seed she tossed outside. The Reverend opened up the old church and aired it out the day before the funeral. Clara and Reet Verge and Queenie's daughter swept out the vestibule and polished the dark wooden pews and set out vases of fresh-cut flowers. The weather hadn't improved much through the month of June, and was still wet and cold into the first week of July, everyone wearing coats over their morning clothes. They set Queenie on a trailer behind an ATV, and the funeral train followed her down to the church. Sweetland bringing up the rear with Duke and Pilgrim and Lovelace. "Queenie Coffin," said Lovelace, "in her coffin. Told me she wouldn't going to be around the fall," Sweetland said. "She been saying that this 20 year, Duke said. She was bound to be right about it sooner or later. "A sin to take her out of it," Pilgrim whispered. He had his face lifted high, uncertain about his footing on the dirt path, his left hand inside Sweetland's elbow. "Should have buried the poor woman under the kitchen floor." "She's dead," Duke said. "It don't matter a goddamn where she goes now." So this passage, to me, it symbolized the whole novel, really. Sweetland is a man who is basically being forcibly ripped from his roots, from everything he's ever known. And all he wants is to live and to die in the place where he was born and has lived all his life. And Queenie is very much like him. She is a woman who never set foot outside her house for about 40 years. Although her husband signed the papers and they were going to the mainland, she didn't really want to go, and she was telling everybody that she wouldn't live to leave the island. This is by far one of the best novels that I've read in a long time. It's the second novel by Michael Crummey that I've read. I read Galore a month or about 2 months ago, I believe. And the ending to this novel is really, really fantastic. So I would definitely recommend it. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. So, Sweetland by Michael Crummey. Pick it up, read some Canlit,